March 22nd, 1927, 7:18 p.m. Bella Napoli sat below street level on Taylor Street, a basement trattoria you reached by walking down 12 narrow steps that smelled permanently of garlic, tomato sauce, and old brick. 14 tables filled the room, red and white checkered plastic tablecloths, bent wood chairs that scraped softly against the tile when people shifted their weight. On Sunday nights, the place was full before sunset. At table 7, in the back corner where the wall met the wine rack, Al Capone twirled spaghetti alla vongolia around his fork, slow, precise, the same measured rhythm he used for everything that mattered. His brother Ralph sat across from him, eating without speaking. Frank Nitti was 2 seats down, cutting into veal parmigiana, his movements economical, practiced. 3 bodyguards were positioned where they always were, one near the front door, pretending to read a menu that never changed, one near the kitchen entrance, close enough to see every plate come out, one near the back exit, half-shadowed, hands loose at his sides. They weren't hiding. They didn't need to. Sunday dinner was the one rule that never bent. No business, no arguments, no messages. For 2 hours every week, the world waited. That's when Salvatore Sally Knives Maranzano walked in. He paused at the top of the stairs, letting his eyes adjust to the low light. 6 feet tall, lean, a scar running from his left ear down toward his jawline, pale against olive skin. His dark suit had been pressed once too many times, shoes scuffed at the toes, tie loose, knotted without care. A leather satchel hung from his left hand. His right hand stayed buried in his coat pocket. The restaurant didn't go quiet right away. Families kept eating. Forks clinked. A child laughed near the front. 2 old men at table 3 argued softly over a hand of scopa. A waiter crossed the room carrying a tray of cannoli, powdered sugar dusting the air as he walked. But the men who understood Little Italy noticed. They noticed the way Sally didn't look at the menu, the way he didn't hesitate, the way he walked past the first 3 tables without acknowledging anyone. His voice was rough, Brooklyn thick enough to carry across the room. Not loud, just confident enough to be heard. "We need to talk." Capone lifted the fork to his mouth, took the bite, chewed slowly. He swallowed, set the fork down, picked up his wine glass, Chianti, house vintage, nothing special. He took a sip, set the glass back exactly where it had been, and finally looked up. "I'm eating," Capone said quietly. "Come back Tuesday." Sally didn't move. "Can't wait till Tuesday." Capone held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "Then you got a problem." The room didn't breathe. Sally's jaw tightened. He slid his right hand out of his coat. Not a gun, a knife. 8 inches of carbon steel, the kind butchers used in the Halsted Street markets. Clean, heavy, honest. He placed the tip of the blade on the tablecloth, just beside Capone's wine glass, not touching it, close enough to make the point. "Don Maranzano sent me," Sally said. "He wants you to know something." This time, the restaurant went silent. Conversations died where they sat. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the kitchen stopped. A cook stood at the service window holding a plate of braciole, steam rising, forgotten. Capone looked at the knife, then at Sally, then back at his plate. He picked up his fork and twirled another bite. "Don Maranzano," Capone said slowly, "doesn't send messages to my table during dinner. He calls, he writes, he sends a messenger with words." He took the bite. "Not steal." Sally's grip tightened on the handle. "I'm telling you who sent me." Capone's eyes lifted again, calm, unhurried. "Then you misunderstood where you are." The words settled over the table like smoke. Ralph's hand was fully set now, hidden beneath the table.
Nitti shifted his chair back a few inches, giving himself space. The three men stationed around the room stopped pretending. They watched. They waited. Sally pressed the knife tip harder. The tablecloth dimpled under the pressure. Maranzano says you're getting too big for Little Italy, says you're forgetting where you came from, says maybe it's time someone reminded you who runs this neighborhood. He stopped himself before the last word could leave his mouth. Everyone in the room knew it anyway. Capone set his fork down, slowly, deliberately. He lifted his napkin, dabbed the corners of his mouth, folded it once, and placed it beside the plate. Then he looked at Sally Knives with eyes that had watched things end and felt nothing at all. "Finish your sentence," Capone said quietly. Sally didn't, because somewhere in that moment, standing over a dinner table with a knife resting inches from Al Capone's glass, Sally Knives realized
Sally Knives stood there waiting for Capone to flinch, to bark an order, to call his men forward. That was how these moments usually ended. A sudden movement, a raised voice, something loud enough to break the tension before it snapped on its own. Nothing happened. Capone leaned back slightly in his chair. The leather creaked, the sound sharp in the quiet room. He didn't touch the knife, didn't gesture toward it. He let it sit where it was, as if it belonged there. "You ever use that thing?" Capone asked. His voice was conversational, almost curious. Sally didn't answer. Capone reached for his wine glass again, not looking away this time. He swirled the Chianti slowly, watching the color climb the sides of the bowl and slide back down. "Because knives," Capone continued, "they're different from guns." The waiter near the kitchen shifted his weight and froze again when Nitti glanced his way. The bodyguard by the back exit took one quiet step closer, positioning himself where Sally wouldn't see him unless he turned his head. Capone spoke without raising his voice. "With a gun," he said, "you point, you pull, and it's done. Distance does the work for you." He took a sip. "But a knife," he set the glass down, "a knife means you're close, means you've already decided, means you're ready to live with what happens after." Sally swallowed. His hand trembled, just enough for the blade's tip to quiver against the tablecloth. "I'll do what I gotta do," Sally said. The words came out flatter than he intended. Capone nodded once, as if acknowledging a reasonable position. "Then listen close," he said, "because right now you got one decision to make." Ralph's hand was fully wrapped around the grip beneath the table. Nitti's chair angled just enough to clear his line of movement. The man near the kitchen blocked the exit without making it obvious. The one by the door had stopped pretending to read. Capone spoke without raising his voice. "You can pick up that knife and try to use it," he said. "If you do, 3 things happen." He lifted one finger. "First, you don't leave this room, not upright." A second finger. "Second, Don Maranzano loses a man he trusted enough to send into my place during dinner." A third. And third, whatever he thought this was going to prove, it proves the opposite. Sally's jaw tightened. "You threatening me?" Capone's expression didn't change. "I'm explaining the room," he said. "You walked in here thinking the knife was the message. It's not." He glanced briefly around Bella Napoli, at the families, the old men, the children, the play. Sunday dinner wasn't tradition. It was boundary. Everyone in Little Italy knew it. You didn't bring business to the table. You didn't bring weapons into a family meal. And you didn't test a man's rules in front of witnesses unless you were prepared to be answered in the same language. Sally looked at the faces around him. No one spoke, no one moved. But every pair of eyes was locked on table 7, memorizing the moment. "Or," Capone continued, "you fold that knife, you put it back where it came from, you walk out the way you came in." He paused. "And you tell Maranzano that if he wants to talk to me, he sends words, not steel." The pause stretched.
Sally could feel the heat in his face now, the weight of the room pressing down on him. This wasn't the kind of confrontation he knew. No shouting, no posturing, no chaos. Just a choice, laid out cleanly. Ralph shifted under the table. Not much, enough. Nitty's eyes never left Sally's chest. The bodyguard near the kitchen adjusted his stance again, cutting off the last open path without making a sound. Sally's fingers hovered over the knife handle. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like he might grab it and lunge, like instinct might win over calculation, like pride might carry him where reason wouldn't. Then he exhaled, slowly. He picked up the knife. Every muscle in the room tightened. Sally folded the blade closed. The click echoed louder than it should have. He slipped it back into his coat pocket and stepped away from the table. Maranzano isn't going to like this, he said. Capone reached for his fork again, twirling pasta as if the conversation had never paused. Then he should have sent someone with manners, Capone said, or come himself. Sally hesitated, halfway to turning around. Capone didn't look up. One more thing, he said. Sally stopped. One more time you bring a weapon to my table, Capone continued, calm as ever. You ever interrupt my family's meal again. He lifted the fork, took a bite, chewed, swallowed. I won't explain the room next time. Sally Knives walked away. His footsteps on the stairs were the only sound in Bella Napoli. The door at street level opened, closed, gone. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then Capone gestured to the waiter. Another bottle of Chianti, he said, and dessert, panna cotta. The waiter moved immediately. Conversation returned in pieces. A chair scraped. Someone coughed. The cook sent out the braciole that had been waiting too long. Within minutes, Bella Napoli looked the way it...
Within 3 minutes, the trattoria looked exactly the way it had before Sally Knives walked in. Plates were cleared, glasses refilled. The card game at the corner table resumed, the slap of cards soft but steady. Someone laughed too loud, then corrected themselves. The cook wiped his hands on his apron and went back to the stove. Normal returned, carefully. Capone ate his panna cotta slowly. He always did. Small bites, no rush. Ralph and Nitti followed his lead, neither of them speaking. They didn't need to. Everything that needed to be understood had already been decided. When the waiter brought the check, Capone didn't look at it. He pulled bills from his wallet and placed them inside the leather folder. More than the total. Always more. Respect had a price, and he paid it without comment. They stood together. Chairs shifted as people subtly leaned back to give them space. No nods, no greetings. No eyes met theirs for too long. That was another rule. At the top of the stairs, Capone paused. He looked back down at the room, at table 7, at the faint impression left in the tablecloth where a knife had rested for 90 seconds too long. Then he turned and walked out into the night. Taylor Street was quiet. A fruit vendor folded his tarp. A couple walked past arguing softly in Italian. Somewhere above, a radio played a song no one was really listening to. The city didn't react. It rarely did. The black Cadillac waited at the curb, engine idling. The driver opened the door. Capone slid into the back seat. Ralph and Nitti followed. The car pulled away, tires humming against wet pavement. On the train east, Sally Knives sat alone. His coat was still buttoned. His hand stayed in his pocket, fingers wrapped around the folded blade. He replayed the moment over and over. The fork, the wineglass, the silence. The way no one rushed him. The way everyone had already decided how it would end. By the time the train reached New York, the message was clear. 3 days later, a different messenger arrived at Capone's office at the Lexington Hotel.
not Sally. This one was older, careful. He carried an envelope sealed with red wax. Inside was a single sentence written in precise handwriting. Don Maranzano respects your Sunday dinners and wishes you good health. No apology, no challenge, just acknowledgement.